Right after the sudden death of the man I always called my father, his second wife, Vivian, and her 2 children declared me a fraud. "You are not Arthur's biological child. You have no right to inherit a single penny of his $10 million company. The gardener's daughter has no place in this family." They had no idea that I held a secret far greater than any will they had seen. I was not Arthur's biological daughter, but I was the only one with the key to dismantling the entire empire they desperately sought to claim. I am Chloe, 32 years old. My birth mother passed away when I was young. Arthur Sterling, my stepfather, raised me. He was the owner of a major software company, a successful but somewhat distant man. When Arthur remarried Vivian, an ambitious and powerful woman, my life changed drastically. Vivian had 2 children from her previous marriage, Marcus, 35, and Diana, 30. Both were raised by their mother to be arrogant, believing they were the only deserving heirs. They always saw me as a burden, an outsider. I work in remote property management, a job they utterly disdained, viewing it as idle and useless. Marcus always craved control of Arthur's company, convinced he was the only capable successor. Diana was focused solely on spending, leading a lavish life without any real work. When Arthur died unexpectedly in a yacht accident, Vivian immediately began preparing for a hostile takeover of the inheritance. She wanted to ensure that she and her children secured the entire company. At the first family meeting with the lawyer, Vivian and her children launched their attack. Vivian said, "I found these old papers, Chloe. They show your biological father is someone else. You are not Arthur's biological child. He raised you, yes, but legally you have no direct inheritance rights." Marcus sneered, his eyes cold. He said, "You can leave right now, Chloe. Our inheritance will be settled much faster without you interfering." I was completely shocked. Though I had suspected this truth, hearing it stated so coldly was a severe blow. I had always considered Arthur my father. I exclaimed, "This cannot be true. I have always been his daughter." Lawyer Davis waited patiently for the chaos to subside before speaking. "Although Chloe is the daughter of Arthur's late wife and appears not to be his biological child, she is mentioned in the very first will Arthur drafted after marrying her mother." Diana immediately cut the lawyer off. She declared, "The first will is irrelevant. My father changed it after marrying my mother. She is not named in the most recent will. She has no claim whatsoever." Vivian nodded triumphantly. They believed that by proving I was not his biological daughter, they had eliminated me entirely, leaving the massive estate for themselves. But in that moment, a crucial truth flashed through my mind. I recalled old conversations between Arthur and my mother regarding complicated, long-standing legal disputes. I looked directly at Vivian and asked a chilling question that wiped the triumphant smile off her face. "Vivian, are you certain that Marcus and Diana are the only heirs entitled to the Sterling name, or are they just your children who assumed Arthur's name?" Vivian's face went pale. She struggled to maintain her composure, but her eyes betrayed deep panic. I knew I had hit the nerve of the secret she had desperately tried to bury for years. I decided not to argue further. "Fine, I accept that I am not his biological child. I will leave the mansion." This act further convinced Marcus and Diana that I was weak, defeated, and posed no threat. I moved out of the mansion, settling into a small apartment and pouring all my energy into uncovering the full truth. My goal was no longer to prove my relationship to Arthur, but to establish who the legitimate heirs truly were. While Vivian and Marcus celebrated my departure, believing they had won, I utilized my remaining access as a former property manager to meticulously examine Arthur Sterling's financial and legal records.
I uncovered a series of old legal files dating back over 20 years concerning a highly complex ownership dispute of the company Arthur had acquired. The files referenced a man named Elias Thorne, who held a significant stake, specifically 40% of the company's shares. Crucially, I also found the paperwork from Arthur's marriage to my mother. It included a specific clause. Arthur had legally adopted me shortly after marrying my mother, a legal precaution he took to ensure my rights should any future complexities arise. 2 weeks later, Lawyer Davis called me. He sounded troubled. He said, "Chloe, I've reviewed Arthur's final will. While it excludes you from a direct inheritance, there is an extremely unusual clause. Arthur designated a man named Elias Thorne as the heir to 40% of the company's shares. This Elias Thorne is described as Arthur's unacknowledged legitimate son." Arthur had a secret son? I was shocked. I decided to share my findings with the lawyer. I told him, "Mr. Davis, I found documents regarding a lawsuit from 20 years ago. Elias Thorne is not Arthur's biological son, but the legitimate son of a rival company's founder. Arthur paid a massive settlement to resolve the lawsuit, and to protect the company, he legally adopted Elias on paper as a corporate maneuver. I explained that the Elias Thorne clause was Arthur's calculated measure to protect the company from opportunistic hands. I then asked the crucial question, leaning into the phone. "Mr. Davis, Arthur legally adopted me during his first marriage. What about Vivian and her children? Did Arthur ever finalize the legal adoption of Marcus and Diana?" Lawyer Davis paused. A long silence on the line. He checked the files again, then sighed deeply. He said, "Arthur Sterling never finalized the legal adoption proceedings for Marcus and Diana. He intended to, but following their recent behavior and Vivian's increasing disrespect towards you, he continually delayed. The most recent will leaves Vivian only a sum of cash and the house." The final secret was out. I was not Arthur's biological child, but I was his only legally adopted child. Marcus and Diana, the self-proclaimed rightful heirs, had no legal standing whatsoever. Meanwhile, Marcus's recklessness was destroying the company. He had illegally fired key staff, leading to a major labor lawsuit, and was bleeding the company's reserves dry with lavish, unnecessary office renovations. Lawyer Davis said, "Since Elias Thorne holds the majority of the shares, and since you are the Arthur's only remaining legal heir under the old legally valid adoption papers, you are designated as the conservator of the joint estate and granted the right to run the Sterling Company until the Elias Thorne issue can be resolved. This is how Arthur structured the will to protect the company from any hostile takeover." I now held the key to reversing my fate. I immediately called Vivian and her children, summoning them to the lawyer's office for one last confrontation.
2 days later, Vivian, Marcus, and Diana arrived. They were smug, convinced they were there only to finalize the distribution of Arthur's cash. Vivian said, "We don't need to prolong this, Mr. Davis. Chloe has agreed to leave and drop all claims." Lawyer Davis looked at them with a stern expression. "There are some complex legal matters we need to address. Let's begin with the clause concerning Elias Thorne." The lawyer briefly explained that Elias Thorne was the heir to 40% of the company and was legally Arthur Sterling's son. Marcus and Diana were utterly bewildered. Marcus shouted, "Who is Elias Thorne? My father never had another son." Vivian began to sweat visibly. She realized a massive hidden heir had just cut into her anticipated fortune. The lawyer continued, his voice growing firmer.
Because Elias Thorne holds a majority stake, and because Chloe is Arthur's only remaining legal heir, she is designated the conservator of the joint estate and has the authority to run the Sterling Company. Vivian screamed, leaping to her feet in fury. "Impossible! My children are supposed to run the company. They are my blood, and Arthur promised me." I looked straight into Vivian's eyes, returning the cold disdain she had shown me earlier. "Vivian, you claimed I was not Arthur's child. What about Marcus and Diana? Where are their adoption papers?" Vivian trembled, trying desperately to avoid the question. Lawyer Davis shook his head gravely. Arthur Sterling and Vivian never finalized the legal adoption for Marcus and Diana. Arthur's last will left Vivian only a sum of cash and the house. Legally, Marcus and Diana are not Arthur Sterling's children and have no inheritance rights to the company's shares. Marcus and Diana were thunderstruck, turning on their mother. Diana wailed, "Mother, you lied to us! Arthur always said we were his children." Vivian tried to rationalize her deceit, but Marcus, facing potential ruin, was beyond reason. Marcus yelled, "You promised me I would run the company. This is all your fault. You and Arthur deceived me." I stepped forward, delivering the final blow. "As the legal conservator of the company, I have reviewed the current financial state. Marcus, you instigated an illegal labor lawsuit and have been systematically withdrawing large sums of money from the company account for personal, non-business expenditures." Marcus went pale. "You have no proof." I placed a thick folder of records on the table. "It's all here. I am formally pressing charges for embezzlement. You and Vivian have been using company funds to pay personal bills for months, racking up immense corporate debt." Marcus turned to Vivian, his eyes filled with desperate greed. He pleaded, "Mom, save me. If I am sued, I will lose everything."
Vivian pleaded with me, discarding all her former arrogance. "Chloe, please, we are family. You can't do this to Marcus. You were like a daughter to me." I responded coldly, my voice unwavering. "Family? You drove me out, called me a fraud, and treated me with contempt. Now I am the only one with the authority to protect the company Arthur intended to preserve, and I will ensure it does not fall into the hands of unethical people like you and your children." Lawyer Davis confirmed the devastating outcome. Marcus will face criminal charges related to the embezzlement and labor issues. Furthermore, Vivian's cash inheritance and the house left to her must be used to settle the corporate debts incurred by Marcus. Vivian was utterly ruined. She lost her cash and the mansion, all due to Marcus's incompetence and greed. Diana, facing the reality of having no inheritance, left Vivian and went her own way. I immediately took over the management of the Sterling Company. I resolved the Elias Thorne issue, confirming it was a legal trust designed by Arthur. I succeeded not only in securing my own future, but also in bringing retribution to those who had scorned me. Marcus was indicted and faced criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. I moved into a new, quiet apartment and continued working diligently, steering the company back on track. Occasionally, I received pathetic emails from Vivian, who was struggling desperately, forced to take on low-wage work. I ignored them all. Arthur had arranged everything perfectly. He didn't leave me wealth directly. He left me a legal position and an opportunity to prove my capability while permanently eliminating the greedy manipulators from my life. I finally found the justice and peace I deserved.